Good evening, everyone. As always, very much appreciate spending your evening either participating as members or presenting to or listening in on this meeting of the Crystal and Pentagon Cities Council. I'm going to start with some familiar opening remarks, and then we'll have CPCC members introduce themselves and identify their presence, and as well as presenters and if any members of the public wish to do so as well. So we are welcome today at the May 18th, 2026 Crystal and Pentagon Cities Council meeting. Tonight we are holding a virtual public meeting which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per the CPCC's electronic meeting policy. All members of the CPCC are participating remotely today. This meeting is being recorded for public records and will be posted on the Arlington County website. Avoid sharing any personal information that you would not like to be made public. I also ask that all folks please mute themselves when they're not talking. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our virtual environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will run. Members of the public may attend the meeting electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided by the CPCC website, the county's events calendar, and the GovDelivery email notifications sent to CPCC email subscribers. Additionally, there's a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For our virtual community attendees, please turn off your video feed, and I will address when it is appropriate to turn it on in a moment. For our members joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during today's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you are called upon. Turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. Members, please keep your videos turned on during the meeting to provide ample awareness that you are a seated member attending the meeting. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes: to assist participants who need technical support and for participants who wish to pose brief or clarifying questions to the larger audience. While the clarifying questions will be monitored, they will not be formally acknowledged. Staff may address these comments as appropriate. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion or inappropriate remarks. Those who are planning to provide public comment may do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat may not be used for that purpose. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during assigned public testimony periods. Additional notes for CPCC members: if members participating wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the video, please turn on the raise virtual hand in Teams, and I, as well as staff, will monitor the video feeds. For our members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment, the CPC agenda items are not public hearing, therefore public comment is at the chair's discretion. I will call for speakers at the end of the meeting after committee discussion has concluded. Speaking time allotted will depend on the number of speakers we have this evening. Virtual attendees, please indicate in the chat that you would like to provide comment, and your name will be added to our list of speakers. Ms. Smith will acknowledge your request in the Teams chat. When you are called on to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon located in your meeting command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. You will be muted when your time is concluded. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded, posted to the county's website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. Along those lines, I do wish to remind CPCC members, and I am included in that we are discouraged from using email traffic for purposes of having discussion about CPCC items or making decisions or coming to a consensus or sharing information. CPCC meetings are the place where we have those discussions, and our meeting protocols outline that as well. But per our open meetings laws and our FOIA laws, email traffic should be used for the purposes primarily of handling logistics around meetings. So discussion around agenda items in particular should be held for only meetings and not for email traffic. So with that, I will ask our CPCC members to please identify themselves and introduce yourselves by your name and your potential, the seat you have on the CPCC, what you represent. So I will start. Ben Devanzo, I am the chair of the CPCC. Maybe we can start by having CPCC members raise your hand and just so we can identify and call on you one by one to make sure we have established everyone who's here. Jeffrey. You are on mute, Jeff.
Hello. Is that,
Thank you.
Am I on? Oh, that's Jeffrey.
I'm Jeffrey Williams. I'm Jeffrey Williams. I'm a Arlington Ridge Civic Association member who resides within the Pentagon city boundaries.
Thank you. And I'll ask you just continue, and you have a number associated with your hand raised. Continue in that order, if you can, please.
Yes, I'm Susan English, and I'm a Arlington Ridge representative outside the Pentagon city boundaries.
Judy, could you introduce yourself, please? Judy, you have to unmute and please go on camera if possible.
Judy Freshman, Crystal City Civic Association.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Mandel. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for the National Landing Bid, so representing the bid.
Robert Vaughn. I'm the Vice Chair of the CPCC with Dweck Properties.
Meg Flores. I am the liaison for the Transportation Commission.
Alex.
Alex Chakrin, representing Aurora Highlands.
Stacy and then Wes.
Stacy Meyer, Aurora Highlands.
Hey everyone, I'm Wes Mayer. I'm the General Manager at Fashion Center, Pentagon.
And then Matt.
Matt Ginnivan, J.G. Smith.
All right. Are there any CPCC members who have not identified themselves on this call?
Rich Kelly.
Thank you, Rich. Representing Arlington Ridge.
Correct.
All right.
And I'll just, this is Jennifer Smith with the Planning Division, and I know we have a few staff in attendance. I'll turn to Anthony and then followed by Mark.
Thanks, Jen. Good evening, everyone. Anthony Fusarelli with the Planning Division as well.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Dennis. I'm the Capital Program Manager for DES Transportation Division.
Ben, I think we have a number of people here for each of our items, so maybe they could introduce themselves when we get to their items.
Agreed. So we'll first move to our first agenda item, which is an update on the 12th Street Transitway progress. So I'll turn it over to you, Mark. Thank you very much for devoting some of your evening to us.
Great, thank you so much. Jennifer, do you have the slides available?
Yes, give me a minute. I'll just pull them up. Thanks. Just let me know when you can see that.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Jim, if you might, there you go. That's the one. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. I hope I'm delivering tonight what we can all take as good news. We are reaching substantial completion on this project that began early last spring. We have a number of items on the construction scope that are now effectively complete. We have a few more things to focus on in the coming weeks, the next couple of weeks in particular. The roadway scope, meaning all of the pavement work is complete, all of the asphalt is in, all of the corner improvements, all of the utility work underground, all of the signals are installed and wired. We're now at a point where we have now cleared with our TE&O division bureau to put down the permanent pavement markings. Once those markings are in place, the traffic signals can be formally inspected and then activated. Once they're activated, then effectively we can reopen 12th Street. And that's roughly the sequence we'll be following. The time frame for that is to get that in and done by the end of May and have it reopened by that period. Now the transit operations, that scope is nearly complete. We still have a few items related to the floating bus islands. There's some issues with some of the materials from the vendors we need to get worked out. There are a few more things to install. So what we're likely to do is to go ahead and open that 12th Street, the two outboard lanes to vehicular traffic, and then pending a final completion and inspection and readiness checklist with WMATA, open up the transit operations probably on about a 45-day, best case 45-day timeline. Next slide. So I thought a little eye candy is in order. These are some shots I took last week for anyone who's been out there. If you could back up one slide for me, please, Jen. There we go. This is a good good visual of one of the floating bus islands. It shows it essentially fully outfitted with all of the amenities that are slated for that. You see the new shelter, the handrails, the safety bollards, the raised curb, of course. At the far end, you can just make out the bright yellow high-vis crosswalk to get users to and from that safely. There are benches. You can see some of the trash receptacles and all of those other items going in. So what's missing in this photo, as you can see, is we're still waiting for those pavement markings. We've got the layout sort of sketched in, the dashed lines you can see for the asphalt portion. The center lane, that's the heavy concrete pavement for the center running bus lanes. Those will also receive that bold red treatment for the bus only indicators. Next slide. Okay. There we go. So this is a slight different view. Looking just the other direction, you can kind of see more of that pavement zone. This focuses on the intersection of Elm Street with the new signals in place. Again, those are fully wired and ready for inspection and activation after we get all those markings in place. Next slide. And for anyone who's been out there today, I noticed that these crosswalks are now in. So it's even more progress since these photos were taken. The rest of these markings will be going in over the next couple of days. And if you go to the next slide, this crosswalk is also in. So we're starting to see some real progress getting this finalized. It's going to start looking more and more like a functional ped zone, like we have always intended. And as soon as we get the fencing out and open up the traffic, it's going to be a whole different ballgame out there. So next slide. This is just a quick timeline of what we're looking to do. The week of May 18th, this week, we're looking to get those final markings in and begin organizing for our punch list. For those who aren't abreast on the kind of construction lingo, punch list is just a way for the county team and the contractor team to literally walk the site and look for any details, things that need resolution, minor issues, things that might need to be reworked or finished off in some way. It's a good way for us to catch all of the little things that might fall through the cracks. We're hopeful that the week of May 25th, we can have that signal inspection and activation period. Those two are separate events, but they can take place within just a few days of each other. So ideally, we would schedule the inspection one week and then have the signal activation perhaps early the next week. And then we're aiming for the week of June 1st to have that construction fencing pulled back and have the lanes reopened with the new signals activated and the new pavement markings in place. And then by late June, early July, we anticipate having that readiness checklist accomplished with WMATA and have all of our boxes checked to get the transit operations resumed. And unfortunately, that does have to go on a slightly different timeline from the rest of the project, but it was just an unavoidable complexity to getting all that coordinated with WMATA. Is that the last slide? I can't. Yeah. Okay. So with that, I wanted to just kind of open up the floor to any questions. I know it's been a long time coming. It feels like it's been much longer than a year we've been working on this in terms of active construction. But if there are any questions at this point, I'll be happy to entertain that.
Yes, I see. And as a reminder, please raise your hand to indicate you would like to ask a question. I see Alex has a question.
So the question I have for this project, particularly within the bus lanes, because we're reducing the number of lanes available for vehicle traffic. What buses are scheduled right now to actually use this? Because I know overall Metroway has had some issues in recent years with ridership, and many times the the speed between you have a wonderful bus station, but the speed, if you miss one bus, you're probably going to have to wait 15 to 30 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes on a weekend for the next bus. Are you going to get the non-physical infrastructure in to make that a usable, or are you hearing that there's plans from the transit agencies to get the the actual physical infrastructure, the non-physical infrastructure, the actual buses going, having bus times that correspond with the ability to actually make this usable for this bus stop, if you live at one of the apartment complexes, the Bartlett, or any of those apartment complexes, that you could just get out, take a bus, and go to Giant, or Giant further south, connects to the transit way. How usable will this stop be?
Well, okay. First of all, Alexander, that's a great question. I am not actually on the transit side. I will do my best to answer that question. But my understanding in general is that the whole purpose of the transit way is to provide a comprehensive link from the south end in the kind of Alexandria Crystal City area all the way to the Pentagon area, where initially there was a large project by WMATA scheduled for the Pentagon parking lot. But we're still wanting to bring all of the traffic on not an express basis, but these raised bus islands provide access to a number of routes. I'm not actually clear on how many routes and what the numbers are. I'd be happy to find that information for you. In retrospect, it might have been smart for me to have one of our transit people on this call for a specific question like that, but I'd be happy to run that down for you.
Definitely, just to get some information about the usability of the site, and what lines, like the tenant.
Alex, I think we're getting some delays from you. All right.
Thanks, Rob.
Alex, if you want to just follow up and send me an email with some of those questions on what lines, we can relay that to Mark. Thanks.
Yeah, and Rob, thanks for that. The key line is the Columbia Pike to National Landing route connecting Skyline to Crystal City. Thanks for that.
So I wanted to ask Mark, we have, it's, I think, important that we do, when we have big infrastructure projects, we do a bit of a retrospective about how it went. I remember, a little over a year ago when it was announced that this was going to be a year-long project, that there's some surprise and concern expressed by both residents and businesses. And businesses along the closure area have been negatively impacted, particularly the smaller businesses, had saw pretty, significant double-digit reduction. I think it was sustained through the period of it. I'm thankful that none of those shut down as a result of this project, because it was a risk. And I remember as well, when this happened, there was a hope that maybe it could be completed in under a year. And it looks like we're going to be maybe completed in a year and 2 months, which is, too much longer than identified. And a lot of folks are surprised that it takes over a year to resurface a street and add in some bus stops. And we don't know, utilities are complicated. And I think this is not just unique to this one project. This is unique to both countywide and even potentially nationwide. So I'm interested if you have thoughts or things you could share about why maybe something like this takes so long and even potentially longer than initially anticipated for a project that I think many would see would be pretty simple to achieve and would, negatively impact our already struggling, in some cases, retail.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really important question. And the short answer is yes. We have a number of key takeaways from this and lessons learned. We have been tried to be very, very sensitive all the way through to the impact that construction has on commercial and residential neighbors. We tried our best, I think, to engineer this in a way that could be undertaken in a phased approach. We have multiple segments to the transitway. When this segment was designed, one of the key elements that made it a little more complicated from a simple resurfacing project was the need for a full depth, heavy reinforced concrete center section. And that's necessary for structural reasons, for long-term durability reasons, ultimately for safety reasons. And linking that to the construction of equally durable floating bus islands is a little bit more complicated than a standard resurfacing project, which under normal circumstances, I completely agree with you. It would have been a much shorter turnaround and much less impactful as a result. So part of that answer is that the complexity of the project is a little more than meets the eye. What also falls into that category of more than meets the eye is the constant struggle we have, especially in Crystal and Pentagon City, mostly in Pentagon City so far, with underground unknowns. We don't know until we actually break ground what we're going to find in some instances. We do have extensive resources, GIS-based mapping, a lot of other mapped resources for utilities, and other things we know of. We keep extensive archive plans of built structures, adjacent properties, a lot of those things. But it's rare for projects that come along maybe 10, 20, 30 years after some of this infrastructure originally went in. It's rare to have a project go in and not discover something that either wasn't mapped properly or it wasn't recorded properly in the archive documents. So we're always on the lookout on guard for finding unknown conditions that might complicate things. And we definitely hit some of those, especially along the Fern Street corridor. One of the key things that slowed us down on this project was we knew we were going to have to coordinate extensively with Dominion Electric, dealing with streetlights. County owns quite a few streetlights. Dominion owns quite a few streetlights, and we sometimes on a new project, we will ask Dominion to decommission so that we can install, and that puts them on our budget and our watch for maintenance. And in so doing this coordination with Dominion, we discovered too late that an unmapped high voltage transmission line runs right down the center of Fern Street. This is not information that is readily available to the county. We have to coordinate with Dominion on a project by project basis, effectively. I got this insight from our engineering bureau leadership that it's something that we know about in theory and in concept and in certain locations where we've worked. Unfortunately, we hadn't dug up Fern Street to discover that transmission line until we were in the thick of this project. So that alone, the coordination for how to resolve that with some of the stormwater improvements that we were making right across that transmission line, that added at least 2 or 3 months of coordination time. It also added an additional number of weeks in terms of just internal processing of change orders to accommodate those things. So I hope this doesn't sound like an excuse. I do hope it helps explain some of the challenges that we've run into on this project that extended it a little further, many months further than we anticipated. But we did our dead level best all the way through to keep the coordination moving forward in as timely way as we could.
Thank you. Meg.
I have a follow-up question for that. I definitely appreciate the amount of work and understand the surprises I feel like that we're always finding along the way here in Arlington. But coming from a transportation perspective, I think we've seen a lot of transit projects over the course of the past 5 years extend well beyond the original communicated deadline to the public. Is there anything that y'all are doing to adjust your timelines to build in extra time for those surprises? I'd rather be much earlier on a timeline than later on a timeline. 2 months is not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but across the highway over in Columbia Pike, I think that's another one that's really rubbed the public the wrong way with regards to timelines. And so I think this would be a really good secondary example to see what the county can do to establish either ways of communicating with the public to ease the stress on residents and businesses, or building time in our transit project timelines, knowing that we're dealing with a mess of the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, Meg. It's a big question. I can give a little bit of a sketch on this project, how it's structured and how it went forward. I am on the transportation capital project side, and I'm in a way effectively not part of the transit team. So the transit planning, transit project development, transit funding, all of those things kind of occur outside of my purview. So when the project is literally kind of signed off from engineering bureau and it's moved to a PO and gets cut and start breaking ground, that's when it became a capital project that under normal circumstances, transit team will often manage their own capital projects. For this particular one, because of its integrated nature with a lot of our ongoing, what I'll use the acronym CPM, my bureau, it's really integrated with Ead Street. It's really integrated with Army Navy Drive Complete Street. It's integrated with, a number of other pieces. The decision was made to put it on my plate to kind of shepherd that through in that context of fitting with these other projects. And so I hope I can answer a little bit about how transit maybe could improve, but I don't want to speak out of class, so to speak, because I don't have a member of their team here to really give you the best answer. I can speak generically from my side that when we have a project, for example, the Army Navy Drive Complete Street, when that project began to extend a little bit beyond our initial goal, what we tried to do was coordinate our webpage updates, for example, to indicate the phase nature of the work and to try to keep up with kind of those progress steps as we made progress. We tried to do something similar here with our meetings and our coordination, our notifications to the adjacent businesses. But in terms of how the project actually took a long time to come to this stage of construction, I think that speaks to how the transit projects are kind of a unique beast. They are often planned at a regional level. They're funded at a regional level. They're often bundled several projects together under one funding request. So if we get funding from NVTA or from other funders, a lot of times this will be one project in a bundle of many, and that can sometimes complement complicate rather how a project then actually moves to the next stage of implementation. And again, I hope that's not too vague of an answer, but it's a big planning question that I hope we can turn back to our teams and say, we heard you. We want to shed some light on that and improve that process.
Yeah, I would really encourage kind of reaching back out to the teams and engaging all the way up to the county manager's office on this, because I've seen the projects coming down the pipeline countywide, and we're looking at a lot of intersectionality projects. And given the way that this is 2 months is not a bad pipeline, I'm really honestly congratulatory for the fact that you were able to uncover a high voltage issue and only have a 2-month increase in the timeline. That's extraordinary. Maybe even using this project as an example of communication and timeline management would be really helpful. Just knowing what we have on the capital improvement plan or on the pipeline, really encourage, like, we want to keep the public's good side, and we can't do that without acknowledging that we're already on the public's bad side about how the Columbia Pike project is currently going. So would definitely encourage you reaching up through, and happy to help facilitate in any capacity I can.
Absolutely. Appreciate that so much.
We should try and wrap this up, but Susan, maybe you can be our last speaker. I have one more thing to say.
Thanks. I just want to say, all through the Columbia Pike project, I get the updates, and they do really help. It's nice to know where work is, what's proceeding, that was really useful for me. I don't know how that works for other people. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I was gonna, Mark, if you want to, I'll add on to what Susan said, is that there were updates about this project weekly, which seemed like pretty rapid. I think monthly would have been more than fine, but then they kind of stopped, I think, without a clear explanation, or maybe it could have just been my email or something like that. Someone can correct me if they kept getting the updates.
Yeah, I acknowledge that we did have some hiccups in getting updates out, and I think what we reached was a point of, we had a couple of just critical delays that we were getting very little movement on, and these were what we call critical path elements that literally no more. We did all the extra work we could, waiting on this critical path element, and it was still waiting. And so rather than weekly updates of, hey, no update, we probably should have handled that a little bit better. But again, once the logjam is broken, then you can really kind of finish everything out. So, but yeah, message received. As far as keeping those updates coming, we take them very seriously. We have a comms team that we constantly work with, back and forth, crafting the best ways to make sure that each project, which is unique, each project has its own kind of identity, personality, and difficulties. And this is, the Transitway represents essentially a once in a lifetime project for the county. We're establishing a major transit link that will be a permanent piece of infrastructure for the county for decades. And it necessarily is going straight through one of the most urbanized sectors of our county. And unfortunately everybody's impacted by construction. It's always unpleasant. So for us, it's always a learning experience, and we take your comments very seriously.
And then can I just ask what we, and particularly because we're going to be talking about the CIP, about what further steps, if I understand correctly, there's another block left, right? The Fern to Hayes block, and then potentially funded or not funded, or not planned or not planned, the additional Hayes piece of the Transitway. Do you know what the kind of?
I can speak somewhat generically about that additional phase. That phase was walked back and basically shelved indefinitely. And so our transit team has done the same. We have basically shuttered phase 2B. The Pentagon bus bay project, as ambitious as it is and was, they just weren't ready to execute on it. And so we have decided not to dedicate capital funds to building a link to something that isn't definitely going to happen. But what we decided to do was utilize the 2A segment, which, if you remember from the images I showed in the short deck there, it showed the block from Fern stretching to Hayes, and it is repaved, and it is marked for new pavement markings. And so we will have those things clearly indicated. It'll still function as originally intended. It just means that the bus traffic that's going to be turning north up Hayes will then just be rejoining its existing routes on our drive and functioning as it does now.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark. It's always good to be able to talk about these things after they happen and learn about the complexities and maybe provide some advice about our priorities and things like that to help in the future. We do need to turn to our next agenda item, which is the TSA site at 601 701 12th Street. This is the block that had been envisioned in the Pentagon City Sector Plan to transform into potentially 3 new buildings with the green ribbon in between. There had been a PDSP presented, and then the site was sold and to a new company with a new vision. So we have Jeff Zell and Ken Wire here to present a initial vision for this site. And then we have Anthony here with the Planning Division to kind of provide what the staff is seeing. And then we have time for us to ideally get some initial thinking about how the CPCC feels about this project and how it fits or doesn't with the Pentagon City Sector Plan and how we feel about that. Enough to give us enough vision to the folks who are going to be participating in the site plan review committee process.
So Ben,
So
thank you for that
can I turn it
introduction.
off? Yeah, thank you, Ken.
So Ben, thank you for that introduction. For those of you I don't know, my name is Ken Wire with the law firm Wire Gill. We are headquartered in Alexandria, and somehow this is my 12th or 15th office to residential conversion. I've done them all around Arlington, but not in Arlington, certainly not at this scale. I'm going to turn over to my client, Jeff Zell, to say a few words. We have about 5 or 6 slides. We'll try to be very efficient. And as Ben said, leave as much time for conversation at the end. So Jeff, over to you.
Sure, thank you. We are the contract purchasers and from Brookfield, and what we've done here is are presenting to you an office to residential conversion. We're staying within the limitation of the building itself for the office to resi conversion. We're adding 2 retail pods to the front. You'll see Ken will take you through them. One 19,000 feet, one 10, and we're adding a liner building that attaches to both verticals that are roughly 2 stories tall that actually fill out the streetscape so that it looks like a residential community and not an office community. The building will be totally reskinned. Currently, our partners are Lincoln Equities Group out in New York City, who we're doing it with. We have Architectonica out of New York and Miami, who's done work for us in Alexandria. I am the land bay developer and done 4 buildings in Carlisle, which is where the patent and trade office is. And I've also done numerous projects in Crystal City. We've been around for a long time. I've been in Crystal City with the Henderson family, which is one of the partners with Robert E. Smith. We had limited interest in a lot of buildings, and we did the blocking over at Crystal Houses 1 and 2 in the expansion there. I'll turn it back over to Ken, who will go through the different aspects of the plan.
Thank you, Jeff. Next slide. So this is your neighborhood. You all know the site well. On the bottom left picture, you can see the site today. It's somewhat unfriendly, if you will, with all the concrete from the street on 12th Street, Fern and Hayes. It's obviously a site that's been completely vacant. Just a little bit of the numbers on the left-hand side. As you probably know, the site's quite large. It's 5 acres. The existing building today is just under 600,000 feet. We're proposing 2 residential arms, if you will, on the ground floor to bring the building frontage up towards Ferns and Hayes. That gets us up to about 630,000 feet of office space. And you'll see on the next couple of slides, we have 2, we think, pretty interesting and large retail spaces fronting on 12th Street. The key parameters of the county's, sorry, Jen, just go through a couple more. The key parameters of the commercial market resiliency initiative are set forth in the county zoning ordinance. One of the key issues is no increase in height. So we are keeping the building as it is. As with every conversion, these buildings are, maybe air quotes, overparked. There's 853 parking spaces. We meet all the county's parking requirements, and we'll have some excess spaces left over. We hope to have a continuing dialogue with the county in the coming years when you're on top of a metro, we should be filling that garage up. It's just sitting there, and we like to be able to use it for parking should the zoning ordinance allow off-street parking or off-site parking rather in the future. Couple comments about the conversion of viability. And all the conversions I've done, the first thing any developer looks at is how deep is the building from the core. When you open the door to your apartment, is the window half a mile away down the road? You can barely see it with some weird small bedrooms in the interim, or do you open it up and you sort of see light air? And this 40-foot depth here is pretty much optimal for a conversion. There's a lot of great things about the core columns and the structure of the building, which allows us to really provide almost a premium structure with some of the building heights you see here at 17 feet on the ground level and 11-foot ceilings on heights on floors 2 through 11. We also have great views, and then fundamentally we save a lot of carbon, not having to tear these buildings down. And as the bottom note, the conversion timing would be approximately 30% faster than if we were to tear this thing out, dig a hole, and start from scratch. So next slide, Jennifer. So I know there's a lot here. We can toggle back and forth if you have questions, but let's start on the bottom of the page, which is 12th Street. Hayes is to your left in the west, and Fern is to your right. As I mentioned, these two retail areas are a unique opportunity for a couple of reasons. First is that it's so far back from 12th Street, there's no real sense of place, if you will. It's just, if you will, office buildings set in a suburban context. So one of the first tasks Jeff asks to his team is when people get out, they want to know what building they're in. So you bring this retail frontage out to the front, and you'll see in a minute, it's also our southern exposure. So that allows us to put some residential amenity space on top. We've also, as you work around the building, let's go up the left-hand side, you see about 9 units on the ground level. We've taken the time to put in residential access points to those that street frontage. That allows us to give some activity there, and it's possible on that side of the building because of the grade. On the right-hand side, it's not. What the next slide will show you is our task in every conversion is how close can you get to the Pentagon City sector plan, given that the fact you're keeping these buildings. So obviously you all know a key component of that sector plan is the half-acre park recommendation for the left-hand corner of this property. The reason I started with the retail is we could leave the retail off and put a big park there, but we don't think that would be as successful. Most of us find great spaces are retail coupled with open space that the public feels that they can meet in and congregate in. So these blue checkered, if you will, are the public plazas on the east and west side of the property, as well as a plaza in the center of the property. And as you can see from our chart, those 3 areas exceed the 0.5 recommendation for a park in a sector plan. Obviously, they're separated. It's not one unified park, but we're doing our best, if you will, to pay homage to that recommendation. In addition to that, we have public access points, and you'll see on the drawings in a second. We can't count that as parks, but that's areas where the community can get through the spine open space. That was a key recommendation of your sector plan. So we took that to heart. These are public access easements that we'll put throughout the property. We felt it was important to denote private open space. The key issues there is most people along 12th Street and around the residential lobby, you'll never know the difference between what's public and what's private. You will, however, as you get closer to the building, understand there's a zone of influence for those buildings, especially in the crook of the elbow, if you will. As you can see between the liner units on both sides, those will be some amenity spaces we have yet to program, but that obviously lends itself more towards the private amenity space that we can't fit on the rooftops of the buildings. Next slide. So there's a lot here, but this is going to tell you the quality and vision that Jeff Zell and his company are bringing to this project. There's a couple of things. I'll start from the top of the building going down. The first is these can't look like office buildings. When you're done converting, you don't want to say, yeah, look at the 70 Brutalist building. I live on the 5th floor. It can't look like that. So obviously we are reskinning the buildings, and the addition of balconies is a great amenity space. Most people love indoor-outdoor space. You see the balconies on both buildings, and they also wrap the other sides. This is just one elevation to give you an idea. You can see the retail here, how it's pretty proud to the street, and obviously there's pools on top. These are just initial programming passes, but the southern exposure gives us a great opportunity for amenity space on top of the retail. And again, 15,000, or a little bit under, 15,000 square foot retail areas gives us a chance to go after some larger tenants, as well as a variety of smaller ones, depending upon what the market is looking for. We also hope those open space areas you see on the left and the right, there are a little retail entry areas that could be outdoor seating. They're not shown on this diagram. That's not public open space, but we all love when you walk up to dining and it kind of blends that indoor-outdoor area with dining. Another key move for those of you who travel up and down 12th Street all the time is there's that horseshoe between the 2 buildings today. We're taking that down to 1 curb cut. That also allows us to add some open space to the eastern building, as well as add a lot of greenery here. This is an important view for us because that center area there is that public plaza, but you can see the greenery and the building entrances that'll be back in that corner. So we're going to pay a lot of attention to the interior of this project because the building main entrances are flanked at the end of that cul-de-sac, if you will, to the center of the project. I'll go to the next slide. And this is just a little bit of the detail of the quality of the retail space we're bringing. This is just zoomed in from that center, obviously curb cut. You're looking to the east and you see the building there with just some placeholders for fashion accessories with the residential tower in the back. Gives you a zoom in a little bit on the quality of the materials we're bringing to the facade, as well as the differentiation of the ground floor retail space and how proud that will be to the street. And we hope that builds on the work you all have done over the past years to pivot this these older office buildings into something that fits in the neighborhood. So that's the end of the presentation. I know it's a big pivot from Brookfield, but where Jeff started, they are selling the property. I take that as a big issue. They obviously did the entitlement working with you all, but they found that not to be financially viable. They went out to trusted partners, and Jeff and his team put together a team that Brookfield felt could deliver. And it's very important for us. And we've been really happy to work with the county staff as we work through this conversion process. So I'll stop there and welcome any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to ask now, actually, that we turn to the staff presentation before we do further questions.
All right. Thank you, Ben. And good evening again, everyone. So I don't have any visuals or anything for this evening. Just want to keep my remarks relatively brief. But, following the application from Jeff and Ken, I want to just highlight a few key points about the county's policy on the transformation of commercial office buildings, and also share some perspectives on where we are with that and what we're seeing. So as a refresher, the 2024 policy that was adopted by the board was done so in direct response to an economic crisis, really just a structural change in the overall office market, and assessing the oversupply of much of the office stock we have in Arlington today. So we attempted to bring forward, in partnership with AED and others, a deliberate and bold response to what we believe will be an ongoing economic challenge. Thus far, we've seen early and strong demand with 4 adaptive reuse applications approved within the first year. We just had a 5th application approved just this past Saturday for 2 additional buildings at 1800 and 1901 South Bell Street in Crystal City. In total, these 5 approvals involve the conversion of 7 total buildings, comprising more than 1.8 million square feet of office space into more than 1,100 housing units and nearly 350 hotel rooms. While each of these approvals is certainly a positive step, we won't really be seeing the real benefits and potential impacts of these projects until the conversion work is completed. And as we know, implementation takes time. We expect that lessons will emerge as projects advance and come online down the road. Embodied in the policy is really a notion of urban resilience and adaptability, in that our urban places, including Pentagon City, Crystal City, are designed to evolve, and we have consistently adapted to meet those conditions and will continue to do so. With this shift and with this policy, it really does reflect and seeks to ensure a conscious balance between potential risks, broader public benefits, but also in a place like Pentagon City and Crystal City, recognizing we have adopted plans, we have adopted policies on the books, and so how do we find and strike the right balance across all of that? And so with that, given the urgent challenges that Arlington is facing in the commercial office sector, and looking ahead, we understand, some of the risks that, hopefully these adaptive reuse conversions and projects will help better mitigate. Should we continue to see, vacant office buildings in significant supply, straining our neighborhoods, we could expect negative impacts on local economic activity, potential declines in neighboring property values, declines or diminishing in the overall quality of public place and public realm in those areas. And certainly, as we've seen, continuing to adversely impact the county's fiscal health. And so a lot of the discussions to date have been about adaptive reuse, is that the repurposing of these obsolete office buildings themselves are themselves a public priority. And so with that, we have devised a distinct process that this adaptive reuse application and others before it will go through, that we believe is right-sized for the proposed scope of work. We've also received, and I think we've welcomed, community feedback along the way in terms of how to refine our process. And so, for example, we now work with the Planning Commission to have them identify a specific liaison for each project. We stand up a webpage and work with the applicants to post pertinent materials. And we are, especially where there are some policy questions or challenges to grapple with, but this may be something we might apply to all projects going forward, is we set up a midday lunch and learn event. So a 1-hour virtual meeting, really an opportunity to not have an SPRC process, but basically have a meeting and conversation that is as SPRC-like in an hour, to ensure that community questions can be raised, staff and the applicant can provide answers, and ideally, comments and feedback can help further shape the project before it gets to public hearings. And so at this time tonight, I really don't have any specific perspectives or opinions, from a staff perspective to share on the specific application. We have that lunch and learn event coming up later this month, and if it hasn't been announced, expected to be announced soon. And so just really wanted to, leave with a few key takeaways, for further thought. And one is that the county's bold adaptive reuse policy has really been successful to date in yielding interest in and approvals for office conversion projects. It will remain a critical tool for economic resilience. At the same time, we will need to see the projects through to completion to better understand benefits, impacts, and we'll need to adjust accordingly where appropriate. We'll continue to learn along the way, and we do expect that certain applications will continue to surface broader policy questions. We acknowledge and we welcome that, and we look forward to engaging with the community and others to consider those questions more deeply through the review process. So with that, Ben, thank you for the time and the opportunity, and happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you to our presenters. I'm going to ask that we first start with clarifying questions. So to clarify and understand what this project is and what they are doing before we go to commentary. And I'm going to ask first, because I think it is an important clarifying question, to Anthony, which is, am I correct that this is not going through the adaptive reuse process, as, for example, the Bell and Crystal Drive projects we reviewed are, but rather is a 4.1 and will have a site plan review committee?
Yeah, Ben, so great question. And I had understood that there were some recent updates shared, and if that wasn't the case, we'll follow up. But so in short form, this application originally came in as a major site plan amendment because there was an additional floor proposed for the top of each building. And that was really the component that would have required a pivot into a major site plan amendment, as opposed to the adaptive reuse process. I think in staff's engagement with the applicant, along the way, they decided to amend or revise their proposal to remove that additional floor. And in doing so, that has now transitioned this application back into an adaptive reuse application type and review. And if Ken or Jeff, if you'd like to say more about that, but hopefully, Ben, that addresses the question about the type of process.
You don't need to say is Ben, I probably should have told you that. We made that decision like a week and a half ago. So I know we had met and had a conversation and that was the case then. So I'll own that I should have probably let you know that that changed in the past couple of weeks.
All right, Jeff.
Yeah, that, and I think that has to go with the fact, we're trying to do, we're replacing the entire facade. And so from our perspective, we were looking at trying to maximize kind of the site as it relates to the parking, and we didn't think adding a floor would be a problem. But just for everybody to understand, this building was built 40 years ago, and there's some issues with shear walls by adding floors. So it would have been a structurally difficult thing to do. We were looking to do it, but we also have our capital lined up to move forward with this. And part of the treacherous element of getting these things done is having everything lined up in an orderly fashion from when we complete, that we can start this and get this done as quickly as possible so that we can help make that 12th Street, which looks phenomenal. I've been on it 3 times in the last 2 days. It'll take that corner and finish that aspect of it, and we hope to get that done as quickly as possible.
All right, Jeff Williams.
I will say that I think that the renderings of the proposed building are quite attractive. I think we've done a nice job on that. It looks like this is kind of adaptive reuse of the existing structures, but you're also adding on and putting the retail establishments there, which I actually think are good and do activate the streetscape. But having said that, it's kind of mixed between whether this is just strictly an adaptive reuse. I will say that the sector plan had some objectives for this parcel, and one of them was the green ribbon. So I would encourage you to take a look at the green ribbon vision and discussions and images in the sector plan and try to create a nicer experience on 12th Street with more biophilia, more green, less hardscape. We have so much hardscape down here. I would like to see a more generous experience for the pedestrians who are moving down 12th.
Yeah.
Also, the last thing I'll say is that there had been a goal of trying to get an 11th Street, which right now is the underground driveway. It sounds like that's going to stay as is to get to the parking. So that means that permeability of the block is impaired. So I don't know how staff feels about that and if they're looking at that or not. Those are my initial comments. I look forward to kind of seeing some improvements on this.
Jennifer, can we go back to the site?
With respect to public open space and biophilia.
Yeah, I think Ken will walk you through this, but we tried, and when we met with Anthony and his staff initially, Jeff, just so you know that, and when we talked to Ben, it was our goal, and I try and do very high-end development in the sense that making sure that the communities are okay with how it looks. And we did our best to actually mimic as much as we could what Brookfield had done for the same green ribbon. And if you look at it, and I know we gave the 20 feet, we gave through the middle, we connected everything. When you really look at it, and I think if you can put up that one plan.
Jeff, if you don't mind, can you go to slide 5? Because Jeff, you are correct. We knew that would be a comment. So we did give interparcel public access cutting across from Fern to Hayes on the northern side. It's not a road, but we did give dedicated public access. It's not all the way what you wanted, but it's hopefully an indication that we knew what the plan said and we tried to meet you there. So it's on page 5. And I know I'm a mile a minute. So on the top here, it's hard to read these colors, but that blue walking space along the top, that will be a public access that you can walk through the parcel on top of the garage from one side of the property to the other.
Right. I see that. What I'm talking about is the space along 12th Street itself. To make that more biophilic, more green, less hardscape. There's, in my opinion, and opinions will vary, there's so much hardscape here. We need more green. That's my subjective feedback.
Understood. Thank you.
Although I did ask that we keep to questions first rather than feedback.
Sorry.
No. That's me reminding Jeff W. as much as anything that we want to start with questions and clarifying questions rather than feedback. Stacy.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Zell. Question for clarification. So 2. One is, how much square footage are you adding? And how does that relate to adaptive reuse? It looks like there's, as best as I can tell, there's 2 wings added, and then to make U shapes, and then there's the retail. So, but the numbers in the presentation show 38,000 square feet. Is that right?
That is correct. And working through with Anthony, the CMRI policy, as long as we were below 2 stories on the addition, that's what gives us that path for the conversion. But your math is roughly correct. About
Okay,
38,000 feet.
Those new wings don't go all the way up.
No, they're 2.
No,
They're
ma'am.
2
Oh,
stories.
good point. Sorry. I didn't make that important point. Sorry. It only goes up 2 stories.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. And then the other clarifying question. Well, the last rendering maybe doesn't exactly fit with the other ones. May I assume that those cars that are shown in front of the building in the last rendering are not there because they're not shown in the other ones or in the plan?
So
like some kind of pickup driveway there?
If I have it right, that intersection there, you're on 12th Street, you're facing north. So the western buildings the eastern buildings on your right, and they're driving up the courtyard to the drop off at our cul-de-sac, and that's the retail on the right-hand side.
Yeah. Oh, I see. I gotcha. I was looking at it. I was thinking it was, those buildings are twin. So
Yes, ma'am. It's a little quirky.
Other direction. Okay, gotcha. And you said the pool was not necessarily in or out because that's sort of
Well, we'll have a pool. What I was trying to be maybe too loyally on, whether they're that shape or not, that's to be determined. But we think it's important to have a pool.
So yeah, I would be interested as a clarification as how far back that pool is, and there's glass handrails there. Is that really what's happening there? Right off 395. So it looks pretty visible from 395. It looks pretty visible from the street. Is that the intent there?
Well, we can get you those distances, but on that perspective, 395 is, I believe, north of you. We're actually on the southern end of the block. You're looking north.
Okay.
As you walk the streets, you will not see the pools from either the sidewalks on either side of the street. They'll be over 17 feet up.
Okay.
And back. So we'll get you those dimensions, ma'am. That's a certainly fair question.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Are there other questions? Yes, Alex.
So is there any information about the community benefits agreement, if there's any still remaining on this site, or any that would be applicable once the the office to resi is complete?
So I'll give you a partial answer, and maybe Anthony can pick up. So we are exempt from some of the other county policies with the conversion, specifically green building and affordable housing. But that doesn't mean that we don't have any community benefits. Most of our dollars are going to be spent on the open space improvements and really getting access to the metro station at the far left corner. But Anthony, I'll stop there. You might have a different answer than I just gave.
No, maybe just a slightly expanded one. But that's correct. I mean, Alex, for adaptive reuse, and this has come up as I think a question and a point of discussion in most applications thus far in the past year and a half, because these are already existing buildings and it's a public priority to see sort of the conversion of these otherwise obsolete buildings into a productive and different use. The conversion of the buildings themselves are really seen as as a community benefit, as part of that public benefit. And so, as Ken said, you won't necessarily see things as akin to what you would normally see in a new ground up redevelopment. I think the only other thing I would add is, I think this has changed with the recent project updates, but historically, Pentagon City has been managed through development potential allocations to individual land base. And so, we will do an assessment to see if there's additional development being proposed that exceed what is currently allocated for this particular land bay. And there may be some further conversation there, but, we'll have more to report on that as we get further in the process.
Jeff W. And then is this Jeff, a clarifying question or a comment?
Yeah, well, it's a clarifying question. Do you have an idea of what the unit mix of the apartment sizes will be, or an average square footage?
They'll run anywhere from about 475 square feet all the way up to almost 975. There's one or two that are over that, and that's where the floor plate kind of turns. Most of the units are going to be in that, what I'll call 750 to 850 area.
All right. So I am reworking this a little bit in my head because I was thinking that we would be more informing an SPRC discussion than rather this, I think, is, Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong. I would imagine our next meeting, I think, is not until September. And so this is very likely going to have board action before then. Is that correct?
We're working towards that.
All right. So then instead of what I was originally, which I was hoping we'd have a little bit more time, we're going to have to take a little bit more time, I think, for this than originally intended, so we can probably result in a letter on this project from the CPCC. So I would encourage folks to share, raise your hand and kind of share, right? And this is a complicated project. When we've had complicated, this is our third adaptive reuse project in this neighborhood. It is both similar and different in that, we've had the others move through. They just approved the Bell Street projects the other day. This is different in that those, were around the Crystal City Sector Plan, which is older. This is around the Pentagon City Sector Plan, which is, of course, much newer, and a lot of work went into it. But as Anthony said, we are in a very different fiscal environment and capital environment. So I'd encourage folks to share the feedback, and as kind of per our process, Robert and I will be working to distill it into a letter that kind of reflects a consensus opinion. So starting with Judy. You're on mute, Judy. You're not technically on mute, but we can't hear you. Maybe, Judy, I'd suggest you join by phone in addition to this if we can't hear you. And maybe, I don't know if staff are able to provide any technical support. But we'll move, Judy, we'll come back to you and figure out how to get your remarks on audio. Would recommend you look, there's information how to join by phone in the invitation. Maybe staff can post that information too. Stacy.
Hey, thank you. Okay, so now we're into comments. Sorry, I was turned around there on your floor plan. Now I know where I am. Two comments. Big fan of Mr. Zell and also of Architectonica. I was thrilled when I saw this team was coming into the area, so very excited. When I looked at the elevation, I was really also expecting Architectonica to show up. I know we're not Miami, but it seems a little tame for them. Just it's an iconic location. It has a lot of potential there. So just first comment is there any potential to do something exciting there? Even though it's Pentagon City. The Helix is nearby, right? Potentially. And the second comment is the idea of integrating retail, coffee shops or something, outdoor seating along 12th, I guess that's 12th Street, is great, but the way it's set up here, it looks like all of that outdoor seating is going to be going into the public space. And so is there an opportunity to pull it back to make it more of a, to really show the outdoor seating, which I believe, at least in in Fairfax, is considered a private property, and bring that, sort of show that what's going to be there and with the seating and where it's going to be and how that's going to work out, and so that we don't end up losing the public's park space to it. So maybe there's both. So those are my two comments. Now I'm over here looking at it on this other screen, so which is why I'm not looking at my camera.
So Ben, would you like me to comment a little bit on that or no?
I think we have limited time, so
Okay,
I
I'm just
think I'd prefer-
asking.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna mute then.
Yes, I think our hope is, we'll take the feedback, feel free to listen and take the feedback as folks share, but I want to be efficient
will.
as we're already halfway
Will
through our
do.
meeting time.
Thank you.
Susan.
Yeah, I want to say that I'm also pleased that it's going to be as nice as it is, given what you're working with, and I even appreciate for all the totally unnecessary garage space. The carbon benefit is pretty big, so I like that, and I appreciate the structural load problems with adding the extra story. I like to at least understand, because I preferred the original version before you did that. But that said, I want to say I agree with Jeff completely about anything you can do to add green, make it greener, make it less, just whether it's planters with plants, however much you can put into that, it really helps. And pedestrian access and walking through blocks has been a problem throughout Crystal City and Pentagon City. So we know you understand that, but we're disappointed too, because we thought we were going to fix that with this project, and it's not happening. So thanks.
Nick.
Did you say Meg? Oh,
yes.
Sorry.
I did.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said Nick. Couple of things. Would just like to encourage maximizing square footage of the residential units. One of the reasons behind us, implementing this at a county level is to enable rapid to market residential while also trying to provide a way for developers and community leaders to come together to revitalize some of the old buildings in a way that would hopefully increase the overall county square footage. I think we're at majority of the 2 bedrooms newly built are under 900 square feet, which is tough. So just encourage you to try and maximize the square foot per unit. I understand that there are constraints with cost, as well as the number of 3 bedrooms. I have a family. We live in a high rise. There's a lot of people on this board that have families that live in high rises. And they are starting to become more common. We are starting to become more common, and 3 bedrooms are miraculous in that. Additionally, just want to throw my weight behind the urge for the green ribbon. Would also like to encourage as many as possible retrofitting parking spaces or outfitting parking spaces for electricity. A lot of the new purchases for vehicles in the county now are electric. So having a revitalization of a building gives us the ability to kind of go back and enable electric vehicle plugins for those that do choose to have a vehicle. I think that's it. I'm sure you'll see more of me on the site plan review committee.
But clarify, there will not be a site plan review committee. Meg.
Just kidding. You will see me at Transportation Commission then.
Rob Mandel.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Ken. Jeff, we may have met, I think, almost at the beginning of my bid career back in 2008 or 9. You might not remember me, but I remember, I know I was excited when you were coming back to the market. So I think looking back, this road only opened in 2016, right? The stretch between Fern and Eads. So this corridor is really transformed into a really important corridor. And this project is going to be very additive. I know the bid is very supportive of what's proposed here. I think particularly having additional retail that really links the two sides, the Crystal City side to the Pentagon City side, is going to
Oh no, maybe.
one of the things that might be particularly interesting to explore in the retail space. There's a lot of retail in Pentagon City. There aren't a lot of other destinations. So to the extent that you can find like an arts and culture destination that can deliver market rents, or even be looked at as a loss leader in some respects, we'd be happy to partner with you and explore ways that we might be able to help facilitate some of those conversations. So definitely looking forward to having you in the neighborhood.
Judy, do you want to try giving another try? Maybe not. Okay. I have some comments, but I want to hold space to see if there's any other CPCC members that want to make comments. Okay, I'll start specifically in that, it's great that we're eliminating a curb cut along 12th Street, and understand we need to have lobby space, which of course, that makes it difficult to have the little bit of the green ribbon that we kind of sort of get between the buildings achieved. I'd encourage you all to think about how you can further demarcate that space to encourage pedestrians' safety and welcomeness. Consider looking at how Wooners have worked, looking across the wharf and on the Grace and the Riva Woonerf behind that project, using alternative paving materials for the driveway, looking for ways, signage, other kind of ways to encourage pedestrians if they do feel that they can enter and utilize that space, as well as potential art, contributions as another potential way to make that space feel more welcome. Along 12th Street would definitely encourage you all to look at the linear park-esque space in front of the Met Park Amazon site on Eads between 12th and 15th as a potential good way to envision how you could further make 12th Street feel more green and welcoming, and ideally integrate that corner park and that entranceway to the metro. On speaking of the metro, I'll add, and I mentioned this to you when we met, but ideally figure out how to make better use of that stairway entrance to the metro on the north side of 12th Street. If there's a way, I don't think we quite understand exactly what the barrier is that makes it only open certain hours, and maybe that is something county staff can help with. Is it a money issue? Because I remember it being a money issue at the beginning, which didn't quite make sense to me. But figure out how we can at least make that entrance feel a little bit more welcoming. Is there a redesign element that can be incorporated as part of that project, given that I imagine a lot of your residents might be using that so they don't have to cross 12th Street in order to enter the metro. In general, ideally we can, I've been wondering how we plan, in this site for the future of the DEA building, which is, they're there now, but have a long-term lease. But won't be forever. And ideally, you are designing that driveway. We have entrances to the driveway on both Fern and on Hayes, and ideally designing that, and as well as the walkway, in a way that could change in the future should the DEA site redevelop down the road and be purchased, even maybe purchased by you all down the road. And so think about how, and we plan parks this way, right? Parks, you look at Center Park, parks that are designed in a way that can be useful as is, but expanded in the future. So encourage that you're all thinking long-term about how the north end of that site could be hopefully future incorporated into a redevelopment of the DEA site. More broadly, I think, it's worth the county to think, this is the second plan that's coming through the Pentagon City Sector Plan. This is the second one that's coming through at a much lower density than originally anticipated, meaning that we don't get as many of the community benefits, particularly the affordable housing contributions, that were originally contributing. The first phase of River House didn't have that excess affordable housing that was kind of envisioned by the sector plan. And of course, we're not getting that in this site too, because it's not meeting the density level. So that you can correct me if I'm wrong. And of course, we have to do what we have to do with the times. We are in some ways making a good improvement now because we're not going to get a great improvement, and we would have to wait 20, 30 years to get a great improvement. And it's better, in my mind, to do it now rather than let it fallow. But we can still be disappointed, I think. And I think it's fair. And I think it's fair for us to think about, how we think about the sector plans, both not just the Crystal City, but the Pentagon City one is already feeling dated despite the many, many hours and time and sweat that went into that plan. And I don't quite know what we can do about that. We are at the whims of the invisible hand, but I think it is worth considering how we can think about these sector plans in this kind of current context and making sure we are not planning for things that will never happen. So with that, I'll ask, are there any other comments, particularly thinking about things that we would want to weigh in on in a letter to probably the Planning Commission and County Board about this project? Right now, I'm hearing that we are overall generally supportive. We really want to encourage more pedestrian integration, consider whether, the retail need to be the size that it is, or if there's a way to scale it back, a little bit. We really like the fact that there's the retail addition that's better for 12th Street, but is there a way to allow more green space and park space and better integration of as much of the green urban as we can? And then, is there a way to think about what retail uses can create a little bit more destination retail? And ideally, are there ways to make the architecture a little bit more exciting? And then I'll what Stacy said, and I think I said this to you too, is making sure that I agree that retail space combined with park space makes a more active park space, but then sometimes you end up with the park space serving as de facto seating for the retail space, and it's important that doesn't happen. And so encourage that we're clearly delineating, privately owned space that's serving the retail versus park space, which is great to integrate visually, spiritually, but not in terms of having cafe seating inside a park. Are there any other comments folks want to add?
And I can say thank you for your time. We went way over. This is the beginning of a relationship. Jeff and I are very accessible. It's not just now, but in the years during the building. Jeff and I are always around. We appreciate your input and look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I'll make this made me think one thing, to the extent that when building construction starts, very much encourage you to find ways, it's not a huge project, you're not, doing major disruptions, but encourage you to provide, release somewhat regular updates about when you see construction commencing and during construction itself, different phases and things like that. The community tends to appreciate it.
We will do that. We have a communications group, and we'll make sure we'll have either coffees or get-togethers where we'll get small groups together so we can listen. If we're doing something wrong, we're more than happy to deal with it. And like I said earlier today, and somebody mentioned this, I started my career over here a long time ago, and I guess 1989. It looks like I'm going to the end where I think this is probably the last two buildings I'm going to be doing. So I'm looking forward to start here, end here. It'll all be good. And the transition of what's occurred over there has been phenomenal. Everybody's input here has made Pentagon City, Crystal City phenomenal. We're very excited about it. And, we're spending the money to put a new facade on the building. I think at the end of the day, this is, and I'll tell this to Anthony, I think we're doing an office to resi conversion. I think this building is better than a building ground up. When I look at all the components and how we've integrated it, there are things in here that we wouldn't have been able to afford in the building that I think this building's going to provide. And I think it's going to be a really great addition to the neighborhood. So with that, Anything else? I think Ken and I are gonna sign off.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Over this. All right, I'll turn it over to our next item, which I hopefully we don't need to spend too much time on. We have, I think Jessica from West Post, from Waltz Colucci on. Is that right?
Yes.
I'll say this is an item that has had discussion in other venues. I know that Aurora Highlands has had meetings and sent letters on it. I think Crystal City may have sent a letter on it, maybe Arlington Ridge. I think there was a request, maybe if CPCC had an opinion on this. So I think our goal is to just see if there is a consensus or not on this site plan amendment to change some of the retail requirements at the West Post site.
Yeah, sure. So I'm happy to give a quick presentation in the interest of time. I'm Jessica Washington, an attorney with the law firm Walsh Colucci, representing the applicant Federal Realty. And you can go to the fourth slide, actually. Yep, this one right here. As you are probably aware, our site was approved for the site plan condition that requires a grocery store between 40,000 square feet to 70,000 square feet and a drugstore between 8,000 to 20,000 square feet. We are proposing to remove the drugstore requirement entirely and to reduce the grocery store minimum requirement from 40,000 square feet to 14,000. Currently, the Walgreens fulfills the drugstore requirement, but Walgreens has decided to leave and the applicant has been unable to find a suitable replacement. We'd like to bring in a new retail tenant, but in order to do that, we need to remove the drugstore requirement from the site plan condition. Regarding the grocery store, our proposal is just to reduce the minimum size requirement to 14,000. Currently, Harris Teeter fulfills the grocery store requirement. They have not indicated they want to leave. We have not asked them to leave, but in the event that they do, we have a hard time finding a suitable replacement. There's truly only one suitable large-style grocery store that could fit here, and that would be Safeway. And if the applicant is unable to find a suitable replacement for Harris Teeter, we have this condition and the site would really just sit vacant until we'd come back through this process again to do an amendment. Reducing the minimum size would allow us to have options for smaller scale grocery stores like an Aldi or Trader Joe's, but it would not prevent us from having a larger size grocery store, which is what we want in our preference. We want Harris Teeter to stay. We want a full size grocery store here, which is why we're keeping that 70,000 maximum. However, this is just, kind of being preemptive and just in case something goes wrong in the future. If we can go to the next slide. This quickly just shows the existing conditions for the area when the site plan condition was added. In the late 90s, as you can see, there's very little neighborhood service retail in the area, but now there is much more available. So by removing the drugstore requirement, as you can see, there are 3 CVS locations nearby. People would still be able to, visit a pharmacy, including the pharmacy that's in Harris Teeter. And like I said, we're not proposing to remove the grocery store requirement. We want Harris Teeter to stay. And so Harris Teeter would remain here. It just allows us to have options to, have a smaller scale grocery store if needed. And so with that, I'm ready to conclude our presentation and receive your feedback.
So thank you for that brief presentation. I'll open it up if folks want to share comments, and particularly if any of the folks from the Civic Associations that have weighed in want to kind of share what they have said. Susan.
Thank you. You will be coming to the Arlington Ridge Civic Association on Thursday. So the people at the meeting will be able to hear more of the discussion. But I was at the lunch and learn. Jeffrey was at the lunch and learn. A lot of members of other members of the community were. So basically, I have not heard from anyone. Pretty much everyone understands about the Walgreens and is looking forward to the cafe and hoping you make a really good job of it. But the need for we understand the economics of grocery stores is tricky. It's less the cost of the space, it's more the cost of the operations. So yes, it's a risk, but the need for a walkable grocery store in an area that has a lot of apartment residents, even if younger people may not cook as much or may not shop once a week. We've looked at the changing patterns, but we still think this is a really important need for the community, as much because it's a social place. You run into people on your way to the grocery store and leaving the grocery store. And even though there'll be a lot of young people coming in, there's still a lot of old people, and we shop and we cook. So everyone I've heard from says, yes, we want the requirement and we're willing to take the risk. Thanks.
Do you mind if I provide a response, or are you just receiving feedback now?
I think why don't we have folks provide their comments first, again, for the best interest of time, and then you can share anything in response. Jeff?
I will just say that I understand and support the removal of the language on the pharmacy requirement, but the full-service grocery store is a special kind of community serving institution. And I do not see that there's a need to have that language revised. And to some extent, having that as a requirement, as a site plan condition, put some additional onus on federal to make sure that they do their best to keep them as a tenant. And I don't understand why there's a necessity to kind of automatically go to downsizing and removing that requirement. So I would not support removing that language from the site plan.
All right, Alex. And then I'd particularly encourage some of our non-civic association folks to weigh in. I'd be interested in some of the property owners or retail or business owners who are on this, who, particularly, I want to make sure that if we do weigh in on this, that there's not folks who are concerned, from their point of view. Alex.
So I've gone to the Lunch and Learn, heard from, other members of the AHCA, and, broadly our memberships, very much in support of keeping the grocery store, and keeping the requirement within the site plan for a full service grocery store. There's, I think a Trader Joe's or an Aldi's, right, has like maybe 1,800 items versus 9,600 items typically within a full service grocery store. And I just think that the amount of options that you have, for all kinds of, right, the entire community is kind of grown up around that grocery store, and very much depends on it for their basic needs. I mean, this is an area where many people don't have a car, don't have access to, a car, and there aren't many other grocery stores in the area, right? The Harris Teeter, that used to be over by the Toyota dealership recently closed, and they're, outside of, paying for a Costco membership, there aren't tons of affordable options that provide, all the different things that a person would need, in a relatively close proximity. And generally our membership, and even at the Lunch and Learn, everyone, the majority of people who spoke in favor of the grocery store for that reason. And, having, multiple different brands and options that you just don't have at a Trader Joe's or an Aldi's, because that's how they make their money, I think is very important, that, people are able to have some type of consumer choice from the grocery store that they go to.
Rob.
Yeah, so just for full disclosure, this property is not within the business improvement district, so take that for what it's worth. I think one of the things but we do often follow and comment on some of these projects. I do think one of the things that we look at is really about, will this proposed change actually help preserve what the community actually wants in the long run? We already do have a large format grocery store that is sitting vacant. And just so you know, the grocery store actually still paying rent. So they're actually occupying this space, paying rent, and closed the store to save money. Now it's a totally different scenario, obviously, but I just wonder whether actually providing more flexibility even now opens the door for potential conversations more quickly, so that you don't have a period of time, 4 or 5 years, where something might be vacant. So I kind of just put out there the cautious. I know somebody said they're willing to take the risk. And I think in our view, flexibility provides the best protection against risk. I don't know about a speedy process and whether that will give potential tenants the peace of mind that they can invest and strategize around a space under the assumption that they'll be able to change the rules at that point. So I just expressed in the best interest of the community.
Thank you. Sarah.
Hi. I just had a question. If the change also included a change with what type of property would inhabit the space, or is it still meant to be conditioned for a grocery store, just smaller, or are you also trying to propose to expand the definition of how the space would be used?
So this would still be for a grocery store. It would just allow a smaller minimum size requirement. Currently, the minimum is 40,000 square feet. We're proposing 14, but we're still keeping the 70,000 square foot maximum. So it gives us
And
that
then
flexibility.
but then the rest of it you would then be selling off potentially.
We're hoping to keep Harris Teeter, and if they leave, to try to get, a full service grocery store in this area. We're not planning on selling off anything or dividing up any space. Our goal is to have a full service grocery store. We want what the community wants. We just want to be able to have those added options in case worse happens. We can, pivot and have a smaller scale grocery store come in without the site sitting vacant, which, that's not good for the community. That's not good for the other tenants in the shopping area. So having this flexibility,
I don't really have an opinion. I was just asking as far as like the flexibility piece went and what would happen if it did end up going to a smaller size. That's all. Thank you.
PC and then Robert.
Hey, so we definitely talked about this, as Alex said, at our civic association meeting, and it's a non-starter for us we couldn't possibly say in a letter anything other than keep the grocery store as it is for all the reasons that Alex laid out. So we feel pretty strongly about it. This is Aurora Highlands, which is, the neighborhood right around you. So we and what we had said to the guy who came to our association meeting was, if you end up with some issue, let's talk about it then, but nothing preemptively. That's just a non-starter. And I have a question for you. I know these grocery stores have long leases, maybe a 5-year bump here and there. Where is Harris Teeter in their lease and extensions? I think we had asked that question when the guy came to talk to us, but I'm not sure that we got an actual final answer on that. When could this actually become an issue is the question.
You may not like my response either, but I can't discuss the lease terms for Harris Teeter.
Robert.
I just wanted to give a counterpoint, given the letter that you circulated, as well as the discussion tonight about the Zell project, and that the county is taking massive steps to provide lots of flexibility to existing property owners in order to convert their use, in order to address an office issue. And grocers and retail are not necessarily having the same sort of acute issues that office owners are, but it is very difficult in urban retail right now. And I do think that having the space activated we would love a grocer, right? A full-scale grocer is obviously the best option available. But, and kind of piggybacking off what Rob said, if the alternative is it's sitting for 5 or 6 years and hoping that something comes along, especially when the nature of grocery specifically is changing, I think, somewhat rapidly. I think that's a relatively big risk to take, especially given the relatively flexible view that Arlington has had towards providing property owners a wider spectrum of discretion in terms of what can be delivered now to address today's issues.
Meg.
Just wanted to agree with Rob. I understand that we would very much prefer to have a very large grocer in there. However, would very much prefer to have anything at all in there versus nothing at all for a multitude of years.
Thanks. And I'll remind folks as well to please keep comments, substantive comments out of the chat, and encourage folks to, if we're having audio issues, to see if you can connect by phone. Susan, you can, I wanted to try and wrap this up, but Susan, you can make maybe our final comment on this. Go ahead, Susan.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I agree about an empty dead space. So would it be 4 or 5 years, or could it be 18 months to 2 years? I understand it's a lot of guessing, and I know that habits are changing. I know a lot of young people prefer a smaller format store. I've seen it. And I think people would adapt, but I'm not convinced that the risk is 4 or 5 years. So I'm just, and I realize, I mean, you in your map you didn't show the commissary, and I know that's another competitor, but it's a gamble, but I've heard the other side of it, and I do understand. I believe it's real, but I think for now the community sentiment is more that we'd rather take the risk.
Yeah, understood. And it's okay if I respond. Yeah, I completely understand. And like I said, we want to keep the full service grocer here. We want to have a large size grocery store. It's just that we cannot force another use in the site. We can't, require anyone to be here. So if we lose our current tenant, if we cannot get another suitable tenant to replace them, the site sits vacant. And in terms of how long it would be sitting vacant, I can't say that. But if we're able to get this flexibility, we can, market the site and tell potential tenants, hey, this site could suit you right now with the existing conditions. Otherwise, we have to go to them and say, we need to get a site plan amendment, which can take a few months. It's discretionary. We may or may not get it. And that increases more risk and more uncertainty for tenants who may want to come to this site. So adding in that flexibility essentially prepares for the worst to reduce how long the site could sit vacant if we're unable to get a full service grocery store here. But I understand what you've all said. We agree with you. We want Harris Theater to stay. We want a full service grocery store at this location. We just can't force someone to be here in the event, a suitable one is not found. And this gives us some flexibility to fill the space so it doesn't sit vacant, which is not good for the community and not good for the other tenants.
Thanks. Alex, is it okay if I try and sum us up, or do you have a quick comment you can make?
No, I'm somewhat confused myself, given that we're able to do that for Walgreens, right? When it becomes an issue, we're able to address it, but we're saying, oh, but for the grocery store, we have to do that, in advance of the problem even remotely being an issue. It seems very strange to me.
Outside the Walgreens location is much smaller than the grocery store location. Walgreens, as you see, the minimum size for the grocery store is 40,000 square feet, which is twice the size of the maximum drugstore area in that site plan requirement. So it's much easier to fill a smaller space than it is to fill a larger space. So it's, it's a great example that you bring up. We were able to find someone to fit in the smaller space much faster than we could find someone to fit in a 40 to 70,000 square foot space. So having the minimum reduced would allow us to fill any vacant space much faster.
All right. I'm trying to think of how, I mean, I think the neighborhood folks have made themselves clear. I'm also hearing, right, and I think we are all on the same page, at least of the CPCC members, which is we want a full service grocery store here. We think it is important. I'd say like we proved, the county approved River House. That's really important. The other grocery stores, there's no other walkable grocery store, right? There's, going to Whole Foods, which would be the closest one, would be not very walkable for people in River House. And there's also probably, I imagine, if Harris Teeter said, yeah, we really don't want to be here, we're leaving regardless of, whatever, then there would be, if a openness to flexibility for a smaller square footage, different types of store there. And then it comes down to a trust issue, right? Is there, the history, is Federal going to do everything you can to keep Harris Teeter as a tenant? Or, by getting this site plan amendment, are you going to feel like you have a little bit more leverage in negotiations in Harris Teeter? It might not keep them with the full force. And I'm not asking you to respond to that, because I don't think that's something that's like really possible to respond to in a public.
I will say we will do everything we can to keep Harris Teeter. Like I've been saying, we want a full service grocery store location here. We want Harris Teeter to stay, and if they leave, we want someone that could suitably replace them. So I can say that Federal Realty will do everything they can to keep Harris Teeter.
Okay.
I guess I could say everything within reason to keep Harris Teeter.
Within reason, sure.
Yeah.
But I think that is just what might be the difference between, the folks who know the retail environment firsthand and know that it is very hard to fill retail, and that having more flexibility makes it easier to market to a tenant and does take time. I imagine if this happened, we'd support a very quick process for that site plan amendment to get something quick. I'm going to have to think about it, or maybe Robert and I can chat to see if there's like something the CPCC can say here that hasn't already been said by the civic associations that represents an additional point of view beyond maybe we all think it's important to have a grocery store here. But I appreciate your presentation and your joining us and sitting through all the rest of the agenda items, Jessica.
I appreciate you having us on. I'm glad to present to you guys.
All right. I am going to move us. We have not a lot of time left. I want to move us to our CIP letter that I sent around and got a bunch of positive feedback on. Some folks suggesting changes and questions. One I do want to address first off, and interested in folks' feedback, which was a request from Carol, who I don't think is able to join today, that the letter focus on or include content on cultural amenities, particularly the theater project, which I know some folks in Crystal City have been really interested in moving forward. I'll say that I don't think that a CIP letter is the right place for a kind of cultural amenities, particularly, given the county's signals. I don't see them investing in that, although folks can tell me if I'm wrong. I have been thinking, I was going to reply to Carol, that we do need to write our annual report, and was thinking that reviewing that will be the content of our next meeting. And actually, we could do a lot in an annual report about the idea and the need for, in Pentagon and Crystal City, for retail, for destination attractions like a cultural amenity. Rob.
Sorry, I was jumping in real fast.
Yeah.
I mean, interestingly, this is one of the places where the Arlington approaches arts and culture a little differently, or has for at least for the last decade. There's just not a lot of capital investment in it. They rely on the contributions from developers solely. And when you enter a market where buildings aren't being built, or we're going to conversions instead of building buildings, no cultural facilities will be built because there are no community benefits that will be drawn from those things. Now, granted, we're in a really tough budget cycle. Will the county come up with, millions of dollars to fund cultural facilities? Probably not. But we might want to stake a claim in here that there needs to be a position change on the point of the position on the side of the county. That is this something that, if it's so valuable to the community, why won't the county invest in it? And that we should be putting capital dollars towards cultural facilities in situations where we know they achieve our know it'll help stimulate economic development. I think that's a really important thing for all jurisdictions to really think about. Most cities get this. That's why cities invest in aquariums and convention centers and all these things, because they know they'll have or hope to have a return on investment. So I'll just stop there. But the top line really is, I would be supportive of considering a way to frame that argument.
Okay, that's pretty convincing to me, Rob. Sarah?
I actually had that question when watching the last presentation, was whether the funding that comes from developers for the arts was affected by doing a conversion rather than a full out thing. So it sounds like we don't get money if it's through a conversion piece. Is that right? Is that something that could be
Yes.
advocated for?
Staff can
Is
correct me if I'm
asking
wrong.
that?
No, the way that these
Okay.
work, Anthony, why don't you explain it?
Yeah, no, thanks, man. It's a great question. I mean, I'll say just as a standard, like we do not have a standard site plan condition that requires developers with site plan proposals to contribute specifically to like cultural facilities. It can be an opportunity, and it has been an opportunity at time in certain site plans in the past. But yes, I mean, I think it's fair to say that with adaptive reuse projects, it would be a challenge to see that materialize from a community benefit perspective. If there were some other type of arrangement or partnership or interest on the owner to, accommodate something, I think that's another matter entirely.
And I'll say, right, there is a standard site plan arts fund contribution that could be either made in cash or in an on-site feature, right? And that wouldn't happen in a conversion. Is that right, Anthony?
Yeah, that's correct. There's a public art contribution that can be in cash, in kind, but yes, that is not a condition that is being included with adaptive reuse projects.
Yeah. Maybe it could be. I'm just going to throw that in there.
Stacey.
Well,
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, appreciate that. We'll take that back. I mean, there's been a lot of other comments to date for adaptive reuse projects, different ideas and suggestions for other things to be incorporated. So we understand the interest there. I think part of it, again, is just taking stock of where we are, where the market is currently, but we will continue to assess. And as we have opportunities to adjust going forward, we will look at those options.
Please.
So I had a question, and still have this question. Does adaptive reuse go into the TIF? Does that get accounted for that way? And if, Robert, tell me, you're shaking your head. How does that work? Is it all projects?
Yeah. So Stacey, great question. And so the TIF district remains constant. And so that covers the entirety of Crystal City, Pentagon City, and including Arlington's portion of Potomac Yard. And so basically, if you envision any incremental increases in tax revenue from increased assessments, just, that are natural growth, or increased assessments in properties and valuation based on reinvestment in those. So with these adaptive reuse projects, we assume there will be a significant capital investment into the conversion of these buildings. The extent to which that then increases tax revenues to the county above the previously established baseline, those would go into towards the TIF. There's a lot there though in terms of like year over year, right? How has the district overall performed over the past 15 years since that TIF was first established? And then there are some nuances there even. But yes, the one thing I will note, because this came up a little bit in Saturday's conversation at the board meeting, with the conversion from office to residential, one type of revenue the county will no longer receive will be the 12.5 cent tax that commercial properties pay into for transportation improvements. So that is a delta. And I'll pause there.
So follow-up question, where is this math and is it publicly available? Because who establishes the baseline? Because if you're taking a totally vacant building and then if that's the baseline, then you've got a huge amount of money in a TIF. But if you're comparing it to a baseline that's no longer relevant from, before AI, that doesn't even seem to make economic sense. So who does this? Who's in charge of this? How do we get more visibility into this? Because it seems like it's affecting everything from theaters to what Crystal City wants to some of our more garden variety things like schools.
Yeah, Stacy, I'll say I am not coming from the area of expertise to address that, but happy to, if we circle back offline. I will say broadly, every 2 years the CIP will includes information on sort of the TIF and its performance and what it's allocated towards. But I'd probably want to connect you with somebody in our Department of Management and Finance to perhaps be better positioned to address some more specific questions you have. But please do reach out offline, and happy to follow up with you on that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think what we really kind of need, because if I've done real estate finance for a living, and I am sitting here going, where is this? It's a total mystery. I can't imagine that other people know more about it. Certainly nobody in our civic association does, and the public doesn't seem to. People like that follow this stuff closely don't know that I've asked. So when I'll reach out, but when you talk to them, if you could, what I think what we're looking for is sort of a primer on it, and sort of let's start with a 101 on how this thing works and who does it, and what the process is.
We'll certainly work with Ben if there's an opportunity to do that in the context of the council, but for sure we can follow up offline and see what we can provide.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben.
That seems like I'll say our fall meeting typically is when we have our county board member come and speak, and that seems like a really good potential presentation on or around the county board member coming. So maybe Jen, we consider that as a potential topic for the fall meeting, a presentation on the TIF. Susan, and I will say we are at time. I apologize that we were going over. I think the TSA building took longer potentially than expected because of the different context we found ourselves in.
I'll just say that Shirlington did happen, and I think the Oliver Carr developer was working with actually Federal Realty, and some of it is just what's happening in the market at the time, the zeitgeist, the financing stacks. I mean, it's just, but in Shirlington had a $16 million capital fund and a lot of regional attention, but it did happen, so it's theoretically possible.
Rob, and I think we're getting into a bit of a TIF weeds. I want to keep our focus as well on the CIP letter. Oh no, Rob just froze.
Defer then. I was going to add something.
All right. Yeah, we will have a future TIF topic. So can we turn back to the letter? I know, Stacy, you had some additional questions that we weren't able to discuss by email, if you want to raise them here.
We're starting about to talk about the letter, I do want to make sure that we're clear on the changes that were asked for before we talk about the questions. I think it's pretty simple. It's just some of the language in there seemed a little bit vague, and speaking to our previous presidents, I went back to that letter from 2023 from all three civic associations, and I thought the language in there was pretty good. That it was clear that any of this new infrastructure shouldn't impact the park. So is that okay? Can we just get that change added? And the other small change was to make sure that we're clearly talking about the existing Aurora Hills Library, whether or not we're talking about Crystal City. So those are two important changes that we want to make sure that gets in.
So when you talk about not impacting the park, Stacey, are you talking about impacting the existing park?
So the language that is being proposed is from Livability 22202 2023 letter. And it says that I think you can keep your whole letter the same way you had it, just adding this one sentence in there that says the addition of new county facilities, school community library should not decrease the net amount of open space. Delivery of planned park should not lag behind new building construction. I think that pretty much clarifies the issue. And for the community center and for the school. And like I said, on the other issue for the libraries, just make sure that the Aurora Hills, when you're talking about bullet point 3, include the Aurora Hills, a reference to the Aurora Hills Library in that sentence.
Right.
As we get into this, we want to make sure that when we start planning these things, or the county starts planning these things, or our grandchildren start planning these things, that we're clear, at least from what the intent is here, that that we don't lose that park space, because it's going to get more intensely used, and it's already intensely used.
Susan.
Thanks. I'm going to kind of go the other direction and say that there's so much we don't know about the next 20 years. So I like it when it's a little less, when it is a little vague. I think it just gives us a little more flexibility. It's aspirational. We know what we hope for, but I don't like to get into, I mean, it might happen and we'll all be dead, all of us, but that there'll be a combination school and library built where Aurora Highlands is now. It could happen. So we don't know. So I'd rather keep it not too specific. Thanks.
Rob.
Ben, did you say the biannual report is due soon? Is that in the fall?
It has to be done this year. So
okay. I was just gonna say, again, the CIP letter, I think is very. I said in the email, I thought it was good. I think it covers the bases. Frankly, a 10 Smith, it feels very difficult to do, particularly for a letter that's supposed to be highly focused on capital improvement projects. And I think there's probably a lot of ways to insert some of the things that are being brought up into the report in a successful way, and in a way that we can talk about them more fully at a future meeting. But I think we just need to make sure we devote the time to it and make it the primary agenda item for that letter, or for that report, I mean.
We missed what you said right before you said difficult to do. You froze a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Gosh, I'm having it chops up every 30 seconds or so. Ultimately, trying to address this letter with only 15 minutes of discussion feels hard to do, and particularly since I think the letter covers a lot of the bases. We could get more specific, but we can also get more specific in the reports of the board.
All right, Meg.
I just want to say a note of caution around too much specificity in these plans. We just saw it ultimately got approved, but we just saw a new townhouse project go through the site plan review, Transportation Commission, Planning Commission, ultimately County Board off Langston Boulevard. That was a group of townhouses that didn't match the Langston Boulevard area plan. It did ultimately get through, but it did cause a lot of contention. It did not have any development on it for upwards of 40 years, and it had several attempts at a site plan. And the reason it was against the Langston Boulevard plan is because they had dictated in the plan structure that there should be a certain level of density, and townhomes did not fit that level of density. It was a very unique project. However, really glad it passed because it did mean that we have development where there was rundown, abandoned houses since the 80s. And so as we think through this as a group, as a council, just encouraging us to create capabilities for our ancestors or our descendants to make decisions in unique situations. We can have set requirements and set restrictions as long as we put clauses in there to allow for exceptions.
Tracy?
Okay, so just getting back to the requested changes, this is pretty basic stuff. We're just saying here that there should not be a decrease in the open space. I think everyone in this room has declared that they like the green space, they like the green ribbon, they want more green space. When we're talking about TSA, everybody chimed in about the green. So I'm not sure why there's an issue here. And why it's not just a no-brainer to just say, yes, Stacy, that's a great idea. We won't decrease the open space that's available at Virginia Highlands Park in that area for when we put in new construction. You know, that's just seems like that's something that we talked about in Livability 22202 3 years ago or 2 years ago. And so this is straight out of that letter. It had the support of ARCA, it had support of Crystal City and Aurora Highlands. So I'm not sure why this would be anything except for a no-brainer, sure, make the change. And then just acknowledging that the Aurora Hill Library should be included in bullet point 3 seems also like a very minor change that should be a no-brainer. And I'm not sure why there's some resistance, it seems like, to these requested changes. So I'd like to understand, Ben, from you what the issue is specifically.
I think there might be, I'll say, we don't want to preclude, right? If, for example, decreasing open space a little bit precludes the existence of a new elementary school that we want and need, I don't think we'd want to completely rule that out, right? We'd want to minimize and maximize open space. I don't think we want to be so rigid as to preclude, as Meg was saying, future changes. And similarly to the library, I don't think we'd want to signal, for example, that the library should stay as is indefinitely and preclude potential benefits to our community that could make things better and imply that there should not be changes.
With all due respect, I don't think that that's what's being said here. In terms of the library, what's being saying is that there is an existing library and that it should be expanded and modernized. That's been a concept that's been in the plans, that's been everywhere since I've been here in over 20 years. So I'm not sure why that is making any kind of new restriction. And to the idea that it says it should not decrease the net amount of open space, I don't think we're creating legislation here. We're creating comments. And so it's not like it's going to be restrictive in the future if people say, oh, you know, we need, like you said, to 5% loss, we'll talk about it then. It's not like this is going to matter. We're just taking a position now that's saying it's a visionary, it's ideal, it's, you know, that this is not where we want to go. I mean, when you're talking about an elementary school, you're talking about something that might have 3 to 5 acres. Okay, and that's not even available there. And you might be talking about something that would be taking up a third or 25 or 30 or 40% of that part, not 5%. So the idea that that we take a stance now and keep what we had talked about 2-3 years ago, I'm not sure why that's not just an easy thing to do. I just don't get it. Unless there's some kind of other objective that you and others have, that you want to have a school here to take up half the park and get rid of the library and move it to Crystal City. Because it seems like that might be an agenda that's sort of happening, because this isn't just, you know,
Yeah.
an easy.
So Stacey, I'm going to ask that we don't imply that people have agendas.
Okay,
Jeffrey?
well, okay, and I apologize for that, but what I said was, to be specific, it seems like it could be a potential, because what else would explain this? I don't understand.
Jeffrey?
Thank you. I generally support the letter that you drafted on the CIP priorities. I found that to be pretty on point, describing the environment that we're currently in. Regarding Stacy's request for the amendments, I actually would not support that. I do agree that those were the hopes and aspirations that Livability expressed in their document. But there was the Pentagon City Sector Plan that I believe included the Virginia Highlands Park. And as part of that, there's an expanded Virginia Highlands Park that will come as part of the River House development. And as part of the document, there was talk about the addition of a community meeting spaces, desires for that, and also for potentially the elementary school. So that has to be sited on county-owned land. And so it may, in fact, be part of Virginia Highlands Park's current footprint, but we don't know. So I would not support bringing that language in about no reduction of footprints and kind of putting constraints and handcuffs on how it develops. As we're currently saying, conditions change over time, and I don't think we should bind ourselves in that way. That's my opinion.
Thank you. And it's exactly right, Jeff. So to your comment, Stacey, I think we could envision a future where instead of the current location of the library at the Aurora Hills facility, there is a new expanded, wonderful community serving facility in the adjacent to the River House property that is both a combined library and community center. And I think that is the vision that some folks might have for down the road.
That's the vision that we see in Aurora Highlands, and these facilities are, you know, within the Aurora Highlands boundaries. So we will definitely be, if you're not making these changes that are very simple and requested, then we'll be taking, you know, a dissent position and sending our own letter to the county. This is insane. Sorry.
Alex.
So I generally feel like it is very important to be very specific about what the priorities are of, you know, I think the more specificity you give, right, you're able to judge the effectiveness of a plan rather than simply stating priorities. There are specific things, right, that you, right, it's like if we wanted to do a performance review, if we were we successful over the last 10 years, you would say, did you do X? Did you create the new elementary school? Did you preserve the land that you said that you were going to preserve? I think the question more so is about what the priorities are, because I think it is very important to have certain things that we really want to make sure, right, county leadership is looking at it and saying, these are the things that we need to accomplish and need to place above all else, right, above other priorities over the next 10 years. So I do have some disagreement in terms of what those priorities are. You know, I was just reading an article about the struggles of Gerber, that fewer people, right, especially over the last 5 years, there was an extreme decrease in the birth rate in the United States overall, right? I don't necessarily know if an elementary school is going to be needed. You know, especially you're starting to see the children of Gen Z. You know, you're typically seeing a smaller generation have kids, and right, the birth rate overall is going down. I don't necessarily know if an elementary school will be needed. but I definitely think that there are other important priorities that, we want to make sure are enshrined over the next couple of years, where if we were going to judge the effectiveness of, whether or not we have, whether policymakers are placing the priorities that we have put in place and accomplish what we want them to accomplish. I think it's very important to be specific about, making sure that there, right, is a second library, right, close and right close to the metroly accessible, because that, right, the Crystal City Library has been ignored, right, for, almost a generation now. I think it's important that we place certain things above others, right? And if there are competing things, we want to make sure that, if there are competing priorities, we want to make sure that it's kind of clear of what we view as most important, whether that is, right, the maintenance of the park, whether that's, right, the creation of, a library, or, more certain, right, cultural amenities. I think it's important to be as specific as possible, whether we want a theater, something similar to a synthetic theater that, existed, maybe around 10 years ago. I think the more specific we are about the demands of, what will make the county better, right? I think the clearer we are to policymakers about, right, if you have to choose between a library and public space, you choose X. If you, right, I think we want to have that level of specificity about what the priorities are. I think we need to have the discussion about what are our priorities. Do we, prioritize one thing above another? Because I think it's how we're able to judge and make decisions without writing that down and making those judgments. I think it's, you're leaving a lot up to interpretation.
Meg?
I don't agree with that fundamentally at this level. There's definitely a time and place for specificity, but at the level of this letter, it's not where it should be. If you put restraints at that capacity, then they can be miscommunicated very easily and end up being put into a plan that does not have effective capability for planners, staff, commission members, and community members to be able to execute on those plans.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, right, is we don't have a consensus. And I want to, make sure we are keeping, this is a planning for a future is a topic we can have strong opinions on, which is okay, and it's good to discuss it. And I want to make sure we're also appropriate in our tones and our uses of language, and would ask all members please to do so. I think what we can do in this case of this letter, right, is to make a note, and we have the ability to do so per our guidelines, that there are some members of the CPCC that felt that there was a desire for more specificity for how certain existing spaces should be used, and could even be specific about desire for more specificity about the future of Virginia Highlands Park and the Aurora Hill Center. And I wonder if that might represent the conversation. Stacey, you did have additional questions, I believe, or additional comments, and would welcome you to ask them here, though we are low on time. You are on mute.
That was probably a good thing. Beside myself on these changes, would definitely like to see what you come up with, Ben, as far as your note. So we talked about the TIF. I guess, some of these things could are not, as we talked about earlier, not necessarily CIP items. So I think the only one that is potentially, I think the rest of it could wait. It's really those three changes that two changes that I'm sure people in the past and in our civic association feel very strongly about, which is the school location, the library location, and the community center. So, and keeping the park available in the same size that it is now, unless there's something that comes up in the future that the goal, the vision should be to keep the existing open space. Let's be clear. There is going to be thousands more people coming to these areas, and this is a very, very, very popular park. These fields are popular. The baseball fields are popular. The playground is popular, and the tennis courts. People are there, and so the idea that this board, this whatever we are, advisory board, would not take a position that's been requested by the Civic Association to keep that open space available when green space has been made a priority by everyone is just beyond me, and I don't get it. I don't get what's going on here. It doesn't seem rational to me. To be polite, to attempt to be polite, it doesn't seem rational. It doesn't make sense. Okay, and then regarding just putting the word in existing Aurora Hills Library, not sure why that's an issue.
Yeah, I don't see that as an issue too, the way that you worded it, Stacy. I think the letter you wrote, maybe we may not be aligned with, but I think the mention of a library in Aurora Hills, in its existence. I think, Stacy, what you said is, to try and help you understand this perspective is, you said, well, in case something happens in the future, and it is that in case something happens in the future where we can get something that is on a net better for the community, better meets the community's needs, is, way down the road, given everything we've talked about, given the county's financial situation, the capital investment, we have
I think they'll figure that out at that time. If that happens then that's not like it's going to work. None of us are going to be around. They're not going to go, oh my God, people then wrote this letter that said, open space must be preserved. They'll figure it out then. The point is what basis point are you starting from? What's your baseline? And the baseline should be, the vision should be to keep the open space available. If they need to work it out, they need to work it out. But, maybe Alex is right. There'll be no children, no elementary school. Lots and lots of things can happen, but why not just take the position today to maintain the amount of open space? I thought this sentence was very well written. It's certainly better than anything I had come up with before I saw it and found it. And it was pointed out to me by Corey Jacoby. The addition of new county facilities should not decrease the net open space. Delivery of planned parks should not lag behind new building construction. It's simple. It clarifies that issue, but
okay. We are 24 minutes over time, so I will wrap us up. I don't see any requests for public comment in the chat. Is that correct?
Correct. I didn't see anything either.
All right. So thanks very much, everyone. Appreciate the conversation. I deeply appreciate you all staying 24 minutes over time. We try our best. We've done good up until now, keeping on time. I particularly appreciate staff who are, doing this as part of their jobs, but it is always hard to do something later, and then I can say firsthand. I think everyone, I believe our next meeting will be in September. In the meantime, we will work on a letter reflecting our conversation on the TSA building. We will make any changes necessary for the CIP letter. And I don't know, Robert and I will see if there's anything that maybe the two of us can say based on the conversation or at that, beyond what the Civic Association's already said on the grocery store site plan request. With that, I will close out the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Right.